The bell above the door at Rusty's Diner jingled as Nia Barnes walked in, shaking off the stray autumn leaves clinging to her faded, oversized hoodie. The air inside was thick with the smell of burnt bacon and cheap coffee. Behind the counter, an old radio crackled, broadcasting the booming voice of Councilman Frank Sterling. Order. Discipline. That is the Oak Hill legacy I built. Nia shoved her hands deep into her pockets, her fingers brushing against the cold, metal surface of her father's police badge. A forgotten legacy fighting against a screaming power. She slapped 2 crinkled dollars on the counter for a black coffee, downing it in one go like it was bitter medicine, before pushing back out into the cold morning air toward the high school. Oak Hill High looked less like a school and more like a stage set for Brody Sterling. He stood by his cherry-red Mustang, draped in his varsity Letterman jacket like a king in royal robes, soaking up the adoration of his court. Toby, his scrawny personal cameraman, was darting around, filming anyone who dared cross Brody's path. When Brody saw Nia pushing her rusted bicycle past the manicured lawn, he didn't just sneer. He looked at her like she was a stain on his perfect world. Nia kept her head down, masking the fire slowly igniting in her eyes. By lunch, the cafeteria was a war zone of noise and ego. Nia navigated the aisle, tray in hand, trying to reach the empty tables in the back. As she passed the VIP table, Brody casually extended his leg. A precision strike. Crush. The sound of the plastic tray hitting the linoleum was deafening. Milk and spaghetti sauce splattered across the toes of Brody's pristine white sneakers. The entire cafeteria went dead silent. Hundreds of eyes locked onto Nia, waiting for the script they knew by heart. The victim cries, the bully laughs. Are you blind? Brody barked, shooting to his feet, his shadow looming over her. Look at my kicks. Get down there and clean it up. Now. Toby shoved his camera lens inches from Nia's face, zooming in for the humiliation. But it never came. Nia didn't tremble. She didn't apologize. She slowly straightened her spine, brushing a speck of dust off her shoulder. For the first time, she lifted her chin. Her gaze locked onto Brody's not with fear, but with a terrifying, deadly calm. It was the look of a predator assessing prey, not a victim begging for mercy. The smirk on Brody's face faltered. A chill ran down his spine. He felt like he was staring down the barrel of a gun, not the eyes of a poor girl from the wrong side of the tracks. Nia walked away without a word. Brody felt humiliated by her silence. He hissed through his teeth to his friends. Who does she think she is? I'll show her whose town this is. Dawn broke over Oak Hill, but the school hallways were still dim and empty. The only sound was the harsh clang of metal being pried open as Brody Sterling's crew forced their way into locker 304. Get a close-up, Brody ordered, his voice echoing in the silence. He kicked a pile of rotting banana peels and a cheap, tangled wig into the bottom of Nia's locker. Toby adjusted his camera lens, grinning nervously. My dad always says history is written by the winners, Toby. We're just writing the first chapter. He slapped a crumpled piece of notebook paper onto the metal door. The marker ink bled through the page. Go back to the jungle. By 7:45 a.m., the hallway was a circus. Students whispered behind their hands, pointing at the disaster spilling out of Nia's locker. Brody leaned against the opposite wall, arms crossed, waiting for the show. Nia arrived. She stopped, staring at the mess. The smell of rotting fruit mixed with the stale air of the corridor. A ripple of giggles spread through the crowd, fueled by Brody's smirk. But Nia didn't scream. She didn't run to the principal. She simply knelt. Silently, she began to pick up the trash. Her movements were methodical, almost rhythmic. As she grabbed a handful of greasy wrappers, a hidden shard of broken glass planted deep in the mess sliced across her palm. Fresh, bright red blood welled up instantly, dripping onto the linoleum floor. Drip, drip. Toby zoomed in, hungry for a tear, a wince, anything. But Nia's face remained a mask of stone. She didn't even look at the wound. She finished clearing the locker, wiped her bloody palm on her jeans, and pulled a thick black marker from her pocket. The hallway went dead silent. The only sound was the squeak-squeak of the marker against paper. She smoothed out Brody's hate note, crossed out his scribbles, and wrote her own message in bold, sharp letters. She taped it back onto the locker, right at eye level. Brody pushed off the wall, shoving students aside to read it. The ink was still wet. The jungle taught me survival. You're just a pet in a glass cage. Brody's face turned a violent shade of crimson. The laughter in the hallway died instantly, replaced by a heavy, suffocating tension. He looked at Nia, then at the note, his chest heaving with bruised ego. He turned to Toby, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper, low enough that only the camera microphone picked it up. "Cut the feed," Brody hissed, his eyes dark. "After school. Chemistry lab. No cameras this time. I'm going to break that stare." The heavy click of the deadbolt sliding home echoed through the empty room like a gunshot. Nia Barnes stopped mid-step. She was trapped. The chemistry lab was bathed in the dying light of the afternoon sun, casting long, jagged shadows across the rows of blacktop tables. The air stank of formaldehyde and floor wax, a sterile, chemical stench that instantly made Nia's stomach turn. It smelled exactly like the hospital hallway the night she was told her father wouldn't be coming home. Brody stepped out from the shadows near the teacher's desk. He wasn't smiling anymore. Behind him, 2 other varsity players blocked the windows. Toby was crouched in the corner, phone low, recording from the hip. "You think you're smart?" Brody walked toward her, slowly unbuttoning his cuffs. "Leaving notes? Making me look bad." He stopped inches from her face, invading her space. "My dad runs this town. I run this school. And you? You're just a guest. Kneel down and apologize, and maybe I'll let you walk out of here." Nia stood her ground, her pulse steady despite the adrenaline flooding her veins. "I don't kneel to cowards." That was the spark. Brody snapped. He moved faster than she expected for someone his size. He spun her around, his arm clamping around her throat in a vicious rear-naked choke. He squeezed. Hard. Darkness. The world tilted. Nia's windpipe was crushed. Oxygen cut off. The chemical smell in the room intensified, merging with a terrifying memory, the image of her father, gasping for air, pinned by a uniform just like the one Brody's father used to wear. The panic tried to seize her, tried to make her thrash and flail like a victim. But then a voice cut through the haze. Her father's voice, clear as a bell from years ago in the dojo. "Don't panic. Breathe. Rotate. Use their force." Nia didn't struggle. She focused. In one fluid motion, she dropped her center of gravity. She grabbed Brody's forearm, not to pull it away, but to anchor him. She twisted her hips, tension slipping her neck just inches out of the kill zone. Before Brody could realize his grip was gone, Nia drove her elbow back into his ribs. Crack. As he doubled over, gasping, she spun to face him and unleashed a single, precise reverse punch yakuzuki. Her fist connected squarely with his solar plexus. It wasn't a brawl. It was an execution of technique. Brody's eyes bulged. All the air left his body in a wheezing whoosh. He was lifted off his feet, crashing backward into the teacher's desk before sliding to the floor, totally unconscious. Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. Toby's phone clattered to the floor. The other boys stared at Nia, who stood over their fallen king, her breathing controlled, her fists still clenched at her side. She wasn't a victim. She was a weapon. Suddenly, the door burst open. 2 school resource officers stormed in, tasers drawn, the red lasers dancing wildly across the room. They took one look at the scene, the white football captain unconscious on the floor, and the black girl standing over him. "Freeze!" The lead officer screamed, leveling his weapon at Nia's chest. "Hands in the air. Don't you move a muscle." Bang. The sound of the principal's gavel hitting the mahogany desk was final, echoing like a death sentence in the sterile office. "Nia Barnes," Principal Henderson said, not even looking her in the eye. "Due to the severity of the assault and the injuries sustained by Mr. Sterling, you are suspended for 10 days, pending expulsion review." Outside the office window, a massive banner fluttered in the autumn wind. "Go Tigers! State championship!" The town wasn't just protecting a boy. They were protecting their trophy. Nia sat stiffly beside her mother, Angela. Angela's hands, rough from years of double shifts at the cannery, trembled as she gripped the suspension papers. Standing in the corner, smoothing the cuffs of his expensive Italian suit, was Councilman Frank Sterling. He didn't look like an angry father. He looked like a man handling a minor pest control problem. "Sign it, Mrs. Barnes," Frank said, his voice smooth and cold. "I'm doing you a favor keeping the police out of this. We don't want to ruin the girl's future over a temper tantrum." Nia stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You're not saving my future," she said, her voice steady. "You're saving your son's season." Frank stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "In this town, little girl, truth is what I say it is. Be smart. Stay quiet." While Nia was escorted out of the building like a criminal, Brody was holding court at the local hospital. He lay in a private room, a small ice pack on his chest, surrounded by nurses cooing over him. He was already spinning the story how she ambushed him, how he tried to de-escalate. A hero wounded in the line of duty. But miles away, in a dimly lit bedroom, the real story was playing on a loop. Toby sat hunched over his laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating his pale, sweaty face. Rain lashed against his windowpane, matching the storm in his gut. On the screen, the video played again, Brody initiating the choke. Nia struggling. The desperate fight for air. He paused the video on Nia's face right before she fought back. It wasn't rage he saw there. It was terror. The same terror he felt every time Brody snapped his fingers at him. "History is written by the winners," Brody had told him. Toby looked at the delete button. Then he looked at the send icon. His hand shook. If he did this, he was dead. If he didn't, he was nothing. He typed a single subject line. "The truth at the chem lab." He attached the file to the district-wide mailing list: parents, teachers, coaches, everyone. Click. Sent. The next morning at Rusty's diner, the breakfast rush was in full swing. The smell of pancakes filled the air. Suddenly, a cell phone buzzed on the counter. Then another in a booth. Then 3 more. Within seconds, the diner was filled with a cacophony of chirps and vibrations. The waitress stopped pouring coffee. The sheriff lowered his newspaper. Everyone looked down at their screens, and the murmur of the crowd rose like a swarm of angry bees. The atmosphere in Rusty's diner shifted instantly. An old Vietnam veteran at the counter slammed his fist down, rattling the silverware. "Look at that. That boy attacked her from behind. That ain't self-defense, that's cowardice." By 8 a.m., the video had millions of views. At Oak Hill High, the hierarchy collapsed. When Brody Sterling walked into the hallway, he didn't part the sea like Moses anymore. He was a leper. His teammates looked at their phones, then at him, and turned their backs. The golden boy was tarnished. He walked to his locker alone, the silence of the corridor deafening. While the school burned with gossip, Nia sought refuge in the only place that felt safe, the old dojo at the edge of town. Mr. Sato, the elderly owner, was waiting for her. He held a tablet with shaking hands. The video paused on the exact frame where Brody applied the choke. "I know that grip," Sato said, his voice grave. "It's not just a street fight move, Nia. It's police technique. Old school. Excessive." He motioned for her to sit. He pulled a dusty yellowed file from under the counter and slid a black and white photograph across the mat. It showed 2 young officers in uniform, smiling, arms around each other. One was Nia's father, Marcus. The other was Frank Sterling. They were partners, Sato revealed. "And that choke, the one Brody used on you, that was Frank's signature move. It's the same move that accidentally crushed your father's windpipe during that raid 10 years ago." Nia felt the blood drain from her face. The room spun. It wasn't just bullying. It was a legacy of violence passed down from father to son. Brody hadn't just tried to hurt her. He had used the same weapon that made her an orphan. "They buried the internal affairs report," Sato whispered, tapping the file. "They called it a tragic mishap. But I kept a copy of the coroner's real findings. I've been waiting for someone brave enough to use it." Nia reached out and touched the file. Her hand stopped trembling. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Suddenly, the old TV in the corner flashed with breaking news. Nia looked up. Councilman Frank Sterling was standing at a podium in City Hall, surrounded by microphones. I will be holding a press conference in 1 hour to address these malicious, edited videos and clear my son's good name. Nia stood up, clutching the file to her chest like a shield. He wants to talk about names? Nia said, heading for the door. Then let's go tell him exactly who my father was. City Hall was a shark tank of reporters. Flashbulbs erupted like lightning storms as Councilman Frank Sterling gripped the podium, his face flushed with righteous indignation. This is a smear campaign, Frank shouted, pointing a shaking finger at the cameras. My son is a victim of cancel culture and digital manipulation. There is no history of violence in this family. The heavy oak doors at the back of the room swung open. Nia Barnes walked in. She didn't shout. She just held up the faded yellow file Mr. Sato had given her. The room went silent, the kind of silence that happens right before a dam breaks. She walked straight down the center aisle, her hoodie replaced by a clean white shirt, looking every bit the daughter of the law. Tell them about 2008, Frank, Nia said, her voice cutting through the quiet. Tell them how you used that same chokehold on Officer Marcus Barnes. Tell them how you buried the report. Frank sneered, his composure cracking. Security. Get this delusional girl out of here. That case was closed a decade ago. It was closed, a shaky female voice said from the front row. Because you forced me to hide the evidence. The room gasped. Clara Sterling, Brody's mother, stood up. She had been a ghost in that town for years, silent and invisible. But not today. She walked to the podium, ignoring her husband's furious glare, and placed a small, silver USB drive on the microphone stand. The unedited audio from his dashcam that night, Clara said, tears streaming down her face but her voice steady. He kept it in the safe. Insurance. I can't let him turn our son into a killer too. Frank lunged for the drive, but Sheriff Miller was faster. He stepped out from the shadows, his badge finally shining with purpose. He clicked the handcuffs onto Frank's wrists. Frank Sterling, you have the right to remain silent. As the police led his father away, Brody stood frozen in the corner. The crown was gone. The arrogance was gone. He looked like a frightened child waking up from a nightmare. He looked at Nia, waiting for her to mock him, to enjoy her victory. Nia walked up to him. She didn't bow. She didn't strike. She simply looked him in the eye. You're free now, she said softly. Don't become him. She turned and walked out into the crisp autumn air. 1 week later, on Thanksgiving morning, the sunlight poured like liquid gold onto the floor of the old dojo. The dust was gone. The windows were open. Nia tightened the black belt around her waist, her father's belt. Outside, a group of neighborhood kids, some black, some white, some rich, some poor, peeked shyly through the door. They weren't looking for a fight. They were looking for a teacher. Nia turned to the wall where 2 photos hung. One of Mr. Sato, and one of her father Marcus, smiling in his uniform. She bowed deeply, a gesture of respect, gratitude, and peace. We did it, Dad, she whispered to the silence. We fought back. But we didn't use fists. We used the truth. She turned to face the children, a warm smile breaking across her face for the first time in months. Shoes off, she said gently. Class is in session. Nia's journey reminds us that true dignity is a quiet force that no bully can shout down, and that history, no matter how buried, always finds a way to the light. Like a sturdy oak in a storm, she taught us that the strongest response to hatred isn't violence, but the unshakable courage to stand for the truth. If this story touched your heart, please share it to spread a little warmth today. Perhaps your kindness is the light someone else is waiting for.